They tell you that in war, every life is equal. They print it on the recruitment posters, they whisper it in the chaplain's prayers, and they etch it into the marble of memorials. But they're lying to you. Or perhaps they're lying to themselves. Because when the dust settles, when the radio goes silent, and when a medevac bird is 5 minutes out, but your ammunition is gone, equality is a luxury you cannot afford. You are left with a calculus of blood and bone. You have to look at the people breathing next to you, people you have laughed with, bled with, and loved, and you have to do the math. Who has the best chance? Who carries the most weight for the mission? Who is already gone, even if their heart is still beating? This isn't a story about heroism in the way Hollywood sells it. There are no slow-motion runs or swelling orchestras. This is a story about the cold, hard arithmetic of survival. It is about the moment I had to choose who deserved to walk away and who had to stay behind in the dark. If you think you know what courage looks like, listen closely. Because courage isn't always saving everyone. Sometimes, courage is knowing exactly who you can't save and living with the ghost of that decision for the rest of your life. The smell of wet concrete and copper is something you never forget. It sticks to the back of your throat, a metallic tang that tastes like pennies and old rain. I was pinned against the crumbling remains of a load-bearing wall in what used to be a schoolhouse, 3 clicks north of the valley floor. My name is Elias Thorne, Sergeant First Class, 75th Ranger Regiment, but in that moment, names didn't matter. Ranks didn't matter. Only the geometry of the collapse mattered. The angle of the debris, the trajectory of the incoming mortar fire, and the shrinking circle of breathable air. Thorne, talk to me. The voice crackled in my earpiece, distorted by static and the sheer violence of the explosion that had dropped us into this hellhole. It was Miller, our comms specialist, huddled somewhere in the darkness to my left. His voice was tight, clipped. He was trying to keep the panic at bay with protocol. "I'm here," I said, my voice sounding strangely calm to my own ears. It was a dissociation trick I'd learned years ago. When the world ends, you become an observer. Status report. Sound off. Miller green. Comms are spotty, but I got a line to HQ. They're saying extraction is 20 mics out. Maybe 30 if the LZ stays hot. Vargas. I called out. A groan answered me. Then a cough, wet and heavy. Legs pinned, boss. I can't feel my toes. But I'm awake. Unfortunately. Vargas. Our heavy weapons guy. A man who could lift a machine gun with one hand and quote poetry with the other. If Vargas couldn't feel his toes, he was in bad shape. Crush syndrome was a ticking clock. If we didn't get him out soon, the toxins from his crushed muscles would flood his system when the pressure was released, stopping his heart before he even made it to the chopper. "Chun," I asked. Silence. "Chun," I shouted, louder this time, ignoring the dust that choked me. "Here," a small, trembling voice replied. "Chun, our medic." She was young, barely 24, but she had hands that didn't shake unless she was terrified. And right now she was terrified. "I'm with Chun. He's got shrapnel in the abdomen. Deep. I'm trying to pack it, but the bleeding isn't stopping." That was Kale, our scout, the eyes of the team. If Kale was bleeding out, we were blind. I closed my eyes for a second, letting the darkness behind my eyelids organize the chaos. We were trapped in a pocket of space created when the roof of the schoolhouse collapsed during the ambush. Above us, tons of reinforced concrete and rebar held the weight of the building. Below us, the earth was unstable. Around us, the enemy, a localized militia cell that had turned out to be far better equipped than intelligence suggested, was tightening the noose. They knew we were trapped. They were waiting for us to try to dig out so they could pick us off one by one. "Listen to me," I said, keeping my voice low but commanding. "We are not dying here. Do you hear me? We are moving, but we need a plan. Miller, can you get a signal strong enough to drop a precise coordinate for the bird? Not just the general area. I need them to hover over this pile of rubble." "I can try," Miller said. "But if I boost the gain, they'll triangulate us. They'll know exactly where we are. The mortars will start walking toward us within seconds." "Do it," I said. "Vargas, can you move? If you pull this beam off my leg, sure. But if you pull it wrong, I bleed out in 10 seconds. Chun, how bad is Kale?" There was a pause. I could hear the rip of Velcro, the squelch of gauze. "Bad, Elias. Really bad. He's losing consciousness. I've got 2 units of plasma left, but without surgery, he's not making the flight. He needs a tourniquet higher up, but there's nothing to tie it to. His pelvis is fractured. The math began to run in my head. Cold, unfeeling arithmetic. We had 4 people. Vargas, critical mobility issue, potential systemic failure upon release. High-value asset, heavy weapons. High survivability if extracted quickly. Kale, critical internal bleeding, unconscious. Low mobility, high medical resource drain. Low survivability without immediate surgical intervention. Miller, intact, essential for extraction coordination. High survivability. Me, intact, leadership. High survivability. The enemy was outside. The extraction was 30 minutes away. The structure was unstable. If we tried to dig Vargas out, the noise and vibration could bring the rest of the roof down on top of us. If we stayed put, Kale would die from blood loss before the bird arrived. If we moved Kale, we risked aggravating his injuries, killing him faster. Elias. Chen's voice came through, softer now. He's asking for his sister. He's delirious. I felt a pang in my chest, sharp and sudden. Kale had a picture of his sister taped to the inside of his helmet. He talked about her all the time. She was studying architecture in Boston. He wanted to build houses, not destroy them. Keep him talking, Chun. Keep him warm. I shifted my weight, wincing as a piece of rebar dug into my shoulder. Miller, boost the signal. Now. Boosting, Miller whispered. I heard the click of his device. 3 seconds later, the world exploded again. A mortar round impacted 10 meters to our east. The ground shook violently, and dust rained down from the ceiling of our pocket. Chunks of concrete the size of fists bounced off my helmet. They found us. Miller yelled, his voice cracking. Signal boosted. Bird is inbound, ETA 25 mics. But they're walking fire toward us. We need to move, I said. Vargas, I'm coming to you. Don't move. I crawled through the debris, the rough concrete tearing at my gloves. The space was tight, claustrophobic. I could smell the ozone of spent electronics and the iron scent of blood. I found Vargas wedged between 2 slabs of wall. His face was pale, slick with sweat. His left leg was twisted at an unnatural angle, pinned under a steel I-beam that had fallen from the ceiling. Hey, boss. Vargas grinned, though his teeth were chattering. Nice real estate you picked. Shut up, Vargas, I said, kneeling beside him. I examined the beam. It was heavy, maybe 300 pounds, but it was leveraged against another piece of debris. If I could shift the fulcrum, I might be able to lift it just enough to slide him out. Chun, I called out. Get over here. I need you to stabilize his leg once I lift. Miller, keep watching the perimeter. If you see movement, shoot through the gaps. Don't hesitate. On it, Miller said. I heard the distinct CHK of his rifle being chambered. I positioned myself under the beam. It was awkward, cramped. I couldn't get proper leverage. I looked around for something to use as a pry bar. My rifle was useless. I spotted a length of pipe nearby, part of the old plumbing system. I grabbed it, jamming one end under the beam and the other against a solid chunk of concrete. On my count, I said to Vargas. When I lift, you pull your leg free. It's gonna hurt. A lot. Just do it, Vargas gritted out. 1, 2, 3. I threw my entire body weight against the pipe. My muscles screamed, tendons popping in my neck. The beam groaned, shifting inches upward. Dust poured down. Now, I roared. Vargas yanked his leg. A scream tore from his throat, raw and animalistic, echoing in the confined space. He freed himself, collapsing backward into Chen's arms. I let the beam drop back down with a thunderous crash. Got him, Chan said, her voice shaking but professional. She was already applying a pressure dressing to the mangled limb. Pulse is thready. He's going into shock. Good work, I said, breathing hard. My arms felt like jelly. Miller, status? 2 tangos moving along the north ridge, Miller reported. They're setting up a machine gun nest. If they get that set up, they'll pin us down until the birds arrive. We're sitting ducks. I looked at Kale. He was lying still, his chest rising and falling in shallow, ragged gasps. Chin was holding his hand, whispering to him. We can't stay here, I said. If they set up that MG, we're dead. We need to move to the secondary position. The basement entrance. It's 50 meters south through the rubble field. 50 meters? Vargas laughed bitterly. In my condition, I'm not crawling 50 meters, Elias. You don't have a choice, I said. And neither do I. I looked at the team. Vargas was broken, but alive. Kale was dying. Miller was scared but functional. Chun was overwhelmed but competent. And me? I was the one who had to make the call. Here's the plan, I said. Miller, you and Chun carry Kale. Use the stretcher webbing. Vargas, I'm going to help you hobble. We move fast and low. Miller, you suppress any movement you see. Chun, you watch Kale's airway. Vargas, you keep your weapon ready. If you see anything, you shoot. And if I pass out, Vargas asked. Then I drag you, I said. Let's move. We emerged from the rubble pocket into the gray twilight. The air was thick with smoke and dust. The schoolhouse was a skeleton of twisted metal and broken stone. Around us, the landscape was a moonscape of craters. As we moved, the tension was palpable. Every shadow looked like an enemy. Every sound was a threat. Miller took point, his rifle scanning the ruins. Chun and I supported Kale's weight between us, while Vargas limped alongside, leaning heavily on his rifle. We made it 10 meters before the first bullet sparked off the ground near my feet. Contact front, Miller shouted. He opened up, his bursts of fire cutting through the silence. I dropped to one knee, dragging Kale down with me. Chun curled over the scout, protecting him with her own body. Vargas, suppressing fire. I yelled. Vargas raised his saw, squad automatic weapon, and unleashed a torrent of bullets toward the source of the gunfire. The noise was deafening, a roar that drowned out my own thoughts. Move, move, I commanded. We scrambled forward, slipping on loose gravel. Kale was dead weight, his head lolling back. I could feel the warmth of his blood soaking into my uniform. Another mortar round landed closer this time. The blast wave knocked the wind out of me. Debris rained down. I tasted dirt. Chun, is he okay? I shouted over the ringing in my ears. He's still breathing, she cried, but his pulse is dropping. We reached the cover of an overturned truck. It offered some protection, but it wasn't enough. The enemy fire was intensifying. They knew we were trying to escape. Miller, how far to the basement? I asked. 20 meters. But there's open ground between here and there. We have to cross it, I said. On my mark. Miller laid down smoke. Vargas, keep their heads down. Chun, grab Kale's legs. I'll take the shoulders. Run. Miller popped a smoke grenade. Thick white billows erupted between us and the enemy positions. Go, go, go. We sprinted into the smoke. It was disorienting, choking. I couldn't see anything but the gray swirls. I heard footsteps, shouting, the crack of bullets passing overhead. Halfway across, I heard a cry. Vargas. I turned. Vargas had fallen. He was tangled in his own gear, his injured leg giving way. Elias. Leave me, he shouted. Get the kid out. No. I yelled back. I ran back to him, grabbing his vest. Up. Get up. I can't. I hauled him up, half carrying, half dragging him. The smoke was beginning to clear. The enemy saw us. Bullets chewed up the ground around our feet. One struck Vargas's shoulder plate, spinning him around. He grunted, but kept moving. We crashed into the basement entrance, tumbling down the broken stairs into the darkness below. For a moment, there was silence, just the sound of our heavy breathing and the drip of water. We were safe for now, but as my eyes adjusted to the dark, I realized the basement was flooded, knee-deep in icy, murky water, and at the far end, the exit was blocked by a collapsed ceiling. We were trapped again, but this time there was no roof to hide under. Just water, darkness, and the sound of enemy boots approaching above us. I looked at my team. Vargas was slumped against the wall, bleeding from his shoulder now. Kale was unconscious, his skin pale and clammy. Miller was checking his ammo, his face grim. Chun was crying silently, holding Kale's head above the water. I had saved them from the open ground, but I had led them into a tomb, and the clock was still ticking. 20 minutes to extraction. But extraction from where? We had no way out. I looked at Kale. His breathing was shallow, almost imperceptible. I looked at Vargas. He was fading. I looked at Miller and Chun. They were looking at me, waiting for the next order, waiting for the miracle. But miracles don't happen in war. Only choices. And I knew, with a sinking feeling in my gut, that the hardest choice was still to come. The water was cold. Not just chilly, but bone-numbing, seeping through my fatigues and stealing the heat from my core. It rose to my waist now, the tide coming in from the broken sewage lines, or perhaps the river that ran beneath the city. It didn't matter where it came from. It mattered that it was rising. Check the exits, I ordered, my voice echoing in the damp cavern of the basement. Miller, check the rear. Chun, stay with Kale. Vargas, can you stand? Vargas tried to push himself up, but his face contorted in pain. He slid back down into the water with a splash. Negative, boss. Legs useless. Shoulders busted. I'm anchor weight. I waded over to him, grabbing his vest to keep his head above the rising water. You're not anchor weight. You're a ranger. Act like it. He looked at me, his eyes glassy. Easy for you to say. You're not the one drowning. None of us are drowning yet, I snapped. Miller, rear exit is sealed, Miller called out from the shadows. Concrete slab. No way through. Front stairs are the only way up, and they're pouring fire down them. We're boxed in. I closed my eyes, listening. Above us, the boots were heavier now, shouting in a language I didn't speak, but the tone was universal. Victory. They thought they had us cornered. They thought it was over. Chun, status on Kale? Chun didn't answer immediately. I waded over to her. She was holding Kale's wrist, her fingers pressed against his artery. Her face was illuminated by the faint green glow of her chem light. He's crashing, she whispered. BP is 60/40. Heart rate is 130. He's hypothermic. The water, it's making it worse. Get him out of the water, I said. There's nowhere to put him. Chun cried, her composure finally breaking. Every surface is wet. Every surface is cold. I looked around. The basement was a rectangular room, maybe 20 feet by 30. The walls were bare concrete. The ceiling was low, dripping with condensation. There was nothing dry, nothing warm, except for one thing. In the corner, partially submerged, was an old electrical transformer box. It was mounted high on the wall, above the water line. It was small, maybe 2 feet square, but it was dry. Miller, I said, can you rig a harness? Something to lift Kale up to that box. Miller looked at the box, then at Kale. I could try, but he's heavy, and if I climb up there to secure him, I'm exposed. If they breach the door, I'm a sitting duck. Do it, I said. Miller nodded, pulling rope from his pack. He began to work, his hands moving with practiced efficiency despite the cold. I turned to Vargas. You, up on the crate. I pointed to a wooden pallet floating nearby. It was rotten, but it might hold his weight for a few minutes. It would get him out of the direct chill of the water. Vargas dragged himself onto the pallet, groaning. Thanks, boss. Don't thank me yet, I said. I waded back to Chun. Help me lift him. Together, we lifted Kale's limp body. He was terrifyingly light. The blood loss had drained him. We passed him up to Miller, who had climbed onto a shelf near the transformer box. Miller secured Kale with the rope, tying him tightly to the metal casing. He's secure, Miller said, but he's still cold. Chun, I said, get up there with him. Body heat. Share your warmth. Chun hesitated. What about you? And Vargas? I'll be fine, I lied. Vargas has the pallet. Get up there. Now. Chun climbed up, squeezing herself into the small space next to Kale. She wrapped her arms around him, pressing her chest against his back. I looked at Miller. Stay there. Keep watch. If anyone comes through that door, you shoot. Don't stop shooting until you're empty. And you? Miller asked. I'm going to buy us time. I waded to the center of the room. The water was up to my chest now. The cold was biting, sending shivers through my body that I couldn't control. I checked my rifle. 10 rounds left. 2 grenades. I looked at Vargas. He was shivering violently on the pallet. Vargas, I said, tell me about that poem. The one you quoted last week. Vargas blinked, confused. What? The poem. About the sea. You said it reminded you of home. Vargas smiled faintly. Oh, that. It was Neruda. I love you as certain dark things are to be loved, in secret, between the shadow and the soul. Nice, I said. Keep talking. Keep your mind active. Don't sleep. Why? Vargas asked. Because if you sleep, you freeze. And if you freeze, you die. And I'm not carrying your ass out of here if you're a popsicle. Vargas chuckled, a weak, rattling sound. You're a bastard, Elias. Yeah, well, bastards survive. Above us, the noise stopped. The boots had moved away. The silence was worse than the noise. It meant they were planning. Setting up explosives? Bringing in reinforcements? Miller, I whispered. Anything. Quiet, Miller whispered back. Too quiet. Then a sound. A hiss. Gas. They were pumping gas into the basement. Tear gas. No, something heavier. Chemical agents. Mask up, I yelled. Everyone mask up. I fumbled for my gas mask, pulling it over my face. The rubber seal tightened against my skin. I looked at Vargas. He was struggling to put his on, his fingers numb from the cold. I waded over to him, helping him secure the straps. Breathe slow, I instructed. Don't panic. Above us, Chun and Miller were already masked. Kale was unconscious, so his mask was useless, but Chun had pulled hers down to check his airway, then pulled it back up. The gas began to fill the room. It was a yellowish fog, rolling across the surface of the water. It smelled of sulfur and rotten eggs. My eyes began to water, even through the mask. The filter was working, but the concentration was high. Vargas, I said, how you holding up? Can't feel my legs, he slurred. I checked his pulse. It was weak, thready. The cold, the blood loss, the shock. He was fading. I looked at the timer on my watch. 15 minutes to extraction. 15 minutes. Could Vargas last 15 minutes? Probably not. Without warming, without medical attention, he would go into cardiac arrest. Could Kale last 15 minutes? With Chin warming him, maybe. But he was critical. Could Miller and I last? Yes. The math returned. Cold and cruel. If I stayed here, Vargas died. Kid Mihti, Miller, and I might survive. If I tried to break out, I risked all of us. But there was another option. A dangerous one. The ventilation shaft. I had seen it earlier, high on the wall, near the ceiling. It was small, maybe 18 inches wide. But it led to the outside. If I could clear it, if I could widen it, we could crawl out. One by one. But it was above the gas line. And it was blocked by a grate. Miller, I said, can you shoot the grate off the vent? Miller looked up. From here? It's risky. Ricochet could hit someone. Do it, I said. Aim for the hinges. Miller raised his rifle. He took aim. Fired. The bullet sparked off the metal. Missed. Again, I said. He fired again. This time, the hinge shattered. The grate swung loose, hanging by one corner. Good shot, I said. Now, I need to get up there. I looked around for something to climb on. The shelves were too flimsy. The walls were smooth. I looked at Vargas. Vargas, I said, I need your help. Vargas looked at me, confused. I can't stand. I don't need you to stand. I need you to be a step. I waded over to the wall beneath the vent. Miller, throw me a rope. Miller tossed a coil of rope down. I caught it. Vargas, I'm going to climb on your shoulders. Just for a second. To reach the vent. Vargas nodded slowly. Do it. I stepped onto the pallet. It dipped dangerously under my weight. Vargas braced himself against the wall, groaning in pain. I stepped onto his thighs, then his shoulders. He trembled, but he held firm. I reached up, grabbing the edge of the vent. I pulled myself up, kicking the grate aside. It fell into the water with a splash. The hole was dark, narrow, but it was open. I looked down at Vargas. He was sagging, his strength gone. Hold on, I said. Just hold on. I pulled myself into the vent. It was tight, claustrophobic. I crawled forward, the metal scraping against my gear. After 10 feet, the vent opened into a larger duct. I followed it, crawling until I saw light. Daylight. I kicked out the cover and emerged into an alleyway behind the schoolhouse. The air was fresh, cold, and sweet. I was out. I looked back at the vent. I could leave. I could run. I could find safety. But my team was still down there. And Vargas was dying. I had a choice. Leave and survive. Or go back and try to save them, risking my own life. I looked at the sky. No chopper yet. I took a deep breath. And I went back in. Crawling back into the vent felt like descending into a grave. The air inside was thick with the yellow gas, filtering through my mask but still leaving a metallic taste in my mouth. I moved quickly, sliding down the shaft until I dropped back into the basement water with a splash. The scene had changed. The water was higher, now reaching my chest. Vargas was slumped over the side of the pallet, his head dangling in the water. Miller was still perched on the shelf, his rifle trained on the stairs, but his posture was slack. Chin was huddled over Kale, rocking him back and forth. Vargas, he shooted, wading over. I grabbed his vest and hauled his head up. His eyes were closed. His skin was blue. Chun, get down here. Chun looked at me, her eyes wide behind her mask. He's not breathing. CPR. Now. Chun jumped down, splashing into the water. She pushed Vargas off the pallet and onto a slightly higher piece of debris. She began compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. Miller, I yelled. Where is that bird? Miller shook his head. Comms are down. Gas must have interfered with the antenna. I can't reach them. Fix it, I roared. Get that signal out. Miller scrambled to adjust his radio, his hands shaking. I watched him work on Vargas. Her movements were frantic, desperate. After 2 minutes, Vargas coughed, expelling water and bile. He gasped, sucking in air. He's back, Chun sobbed. He's back. But he wasn't out of the woods. He was weaker than before. Miller, status? Got a ping. Miller shouted. Bird is 2 mics out, but they can't land here. The LZ is compromised. They're hovering over the roof. We have to get to the roof. The roof. 30 feet up, through a collapsed staircase, through enemy fire, with 2 critically injured men. It was impossible, but it was the only option. Okay, I said, my mind racing. New plan. Miller, you and Chun carry Kale. I'll carry Vargas. You can't carry Vargas, Chun said. He's dead weight. I'll drag him if I have to, I said. We move now. We form a chain. Miller and Chun lifted Kale, using the rope as a sling. I hoisted Vargas over my shoulder, his arm draped around my neck. He was heavy, smelling of sweat and blood. We moved toward the stairs. The water resisted every step, slowing us down. As we reached the base of the stairs, the door at the top burst open. Enemy soldiers. 3 of them. They froze, surprised to see us emerging from the water. I didn't hesitate. I dropped Vargas, drew my pistol, and fired. 2 shots. 2 bodies dropped. The 3rd soldier raised his rifle. Miller fired from behind me, hitting the soldier in the chest. He fell back up the stairs. Go! Go! I yelled. We climbed the stairs, slipping on the wet concrete. Vargas was groaning, his weight dragging me down. My muscles burned, screaming in protest. We reached the top floor. The roof was exposed to the sky. The wind was howling. Rain had started to fall, mixing with the smoke. Above us, the sound of rotors grew louder. The chopper was there, hovering precariously close to the edge of the building. A rope ladder dangled down. Miller, throw the line. I ordered. Miller grabbed the rope ladder and tied it to a sturdy pillar. Chun, send Kale up. Chun pushed Kale up the ladder. Miller climbed after him, securing the scout. Vargas, next, I said. I lifted Vargas, pushing him toward the ladder. He grabbed it with one hand, his other arm useless. He began to climb, slowly, painfully. I watched him. Each rung was a struggle. He slipped once, hanging by one hand. Come on, Vargas, I shouted. Don't you quit on me. He pulled himself up, inch by inch. Then the enemy returned. More soldiers poured out of the stairwell. Bullets sparked around us. I turned, raising my rifle. I had 3 rounds left. I fired. 1 soldier down. 2 more appeared. I fired again. 1 down. 1 left. He raised his rifle. I had no ammo. I dove behind a concrete barrier, just as bullets chewed up the spot where I had been standing. I looked up. Vargas was halfway up the ladder. Chun and Miller were at the top, pulling Kale into the chopper. The chopper pilot leaned out, signaling me to hurry. I looked at the enemy soldier. He was advancing, stepping over the bodies of his comrades. I looked at Vargas. He was struggling. I had a grenade left. I pulled a pin. I didn't throw it at the soldier. I threw it at the base of the stairwell door. The explosion rocked the building. The door collapsed, blocking the entrance. The soldier was thrown back, stunned. It bought me seconds. I ran to the ladder. I grabbed it and began to climb. My arms were weak. My legs were numb, but I climbed. Vargas was just above me. He reached down, grabbing my hand. Together, he wheezed. We climbed together, hand in hand, up into the sky. As we reached the top, the chopper crew pulled us in. I collapsed onto the floor of the cabin, gasping for air. Vargas lay next to me, unconscious but alive. Kale was strapped to a stretcher and 4 in his arm. Chin was working on him, her face streaked with tears and dirt. Miller sat opposite me, his head in his hands. The chopper banked sharply, turning away from the schoolhouse. I looked out the window. The schoolhouse was shrinking, disappearing into the smoke and rain. We had made it, all of us. But as I looked at Vargas, at the pale stillness of his face, I knew the cost. He would lose his leg. Kale would spend months in recovery. Miller would have nightmares. Chun would carry the weight of those minutes in the water for the rest of her life. And I carried the memory of the choice. The moment I decided who was worth saving. I hadn't chosen. Not really. I had fought for all of them. But in doing so, I had nearly lost them all. The pilot's voice came over the intercom. Welcome home, Rangers. Home. It felt like a foreign word. I closed my eyes, listening to the rhythm of the rotors. It sounded like a heartbeat. Slow, steady, alive. And for the first time in hours, I allowed myself to breathe. But I knew, as the sun began to rise over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, that the arithmetic of war never truly ends. You just carry the sum with you forever. And sometimes the sum is heavier than the debt.